Now also Brazil is taking strides as a major competitor for U.S. corn and soybeans. As the world's largest soybean exporter, Brazil's yields on average have been growing faster over the last 50 years than the U.S. Joanna Calusi is with the University of Illinois' Agriculture and Consumer Economics Department. She's originally from southern Brazil and breaks down why the country's production is growing, giving us an insight into how many more acres they could have in the future.
There was a huge expansion in the last decades. Soybeans started in Brazil, in the south of Brazil, near Argentina and Uruguay. But nowadays, the most important region of soybeans in Brazil in the center-west states, like Mato Grosso, Goiás, Mato Grosso do Sul, in the Brazilian savanna that we call Cerrado. So if you compare the yields in the United States and Brazil, they are pretty similar, around 60 bushels per acre. So when you go to the south of Brazil, like nowadays in the current crop season, there is a drought there. So it's very unstable. We never know what the weather will be in the south of Brazil, but in the center west of Brazil is much more stable in terms of wet season and dry season. I would say that's one of the factors that can explain. Also the use of technology in Brazil, especially in this region, again in the center-west states, there is a lot of big farmers, so they are able to invest more in technology, in machinery, seeds, fertilizers, and that's the reason also that yields are pretty similar than the United States.
And that's so interesting because Brazil is such a competitor for U.S. commodities. How many seasons do they have for growing crops in Brazil?
It is possible to have at least 2 crop seasons in Brazil. There are some places where farmers can have 3 crops per year. When you think about the summer season, is where the soybean is planted in Brazil from September until January, February. That means farmers will plant the soybeans starting in September and will harvest the soybeans in January and February. And then in the same day or in the day after, they will plant corn as a second season.
And so what's the potential here? You've also done another article on that, and how would that impact the U.S.?
When you think about the future, there are 2 factors that could lead Brazil to increase even more its soybean production and corn production as well. One is yields that we just talked about, so farmers can increase the yields, especially using new technologies. The same for corn and soybeans, but also there is another potential based on the conversion from degraded pasture land into cropland. What is degraded pasture land? It's the areas that nowadays are used by livestock. We are not talking about deforestation. We're not talking about native areas. We are talking about the areas that were already converted in the past for livestock, but nowadays they are not so productive in terms of yields and in terms of revenue. That there is a potential around 70 million acres that Brazil could increase from degraded pasture land into cropland. Plus, moreover, there is the potential to increase the area that nowadays is occupied by a second crop. Remember that I said that corn is normally planted as a second season. So if you look at the areas in the center-west that nowadays are occupied by soybeans, we can say that this area could be occupied by corn as a second season. There is an additional 40 million acres that could increase as corn production in Brazil. So I'm talking about roughly 100 million acres that could be added to Brazilian agriculture, just looking the availability of land.